Hello again everybody and welcome back to the channel. I am McSnazzy and today we are back in another episode of Planet Zoo here on the channel in our Ranger Park Zoo series. Today we got a super cool build to show you guys and I'm really excited to get to it, but let's get some of the stuff out of the way. This is episode 15 of the Ranger Park Zoo series. If you have missed any of the episodes before this or missed one in between of some sort, check out in the top right corner right now. There will be a playlist that you can click on to see any of the episodes before this so you don't necessarily spoil any of the other builds. But in this episode we are doing the polar bears. We're going to extend our bear walk area and add another big bear to the area itself, and it's going to be the polar bear. And this is a very big build because the polar bears require a very large amount of land. But before that, if you are not interested in watching all of the time lapse, there is a timestamp in the description below that will take you straight to our real-time walkthrough of the final product of the build, so you guys can see it in first person and some overhead shots of the build without having to watch all of the time lapse if that's not your thing. So go check that out in the description below if that is something you're interested in. Now that we are into the episode, into the time lapse here, we are going to get going on this polar bear build, and it is really big. I wanted to sort of put a research center here for all the bear species initially, but I got going building sort of this build and it just kind of worked as just a polar bear sort of building where you go in, you can learn a little about the polar bear, you can also get some really nice views of the polar bear. So that's really what I ended up going for in the end, because it just worked out a lot better than building a huge bear research center, and it just worked out for this build in general. Now the time lapse is going to jump around a little. To get this going, I kind of went all over the place, and now you get to see sort of what the building is going to look like in the end. It does switch a little bit, and we're going to do a little bit of that work right now, but the stuff you're seeing on the screen at the starting was sort of my first iterations of the build, and when I'm trying to sort of get inspiration of what exactly I want to do. The first wooden sort of building that I made didn't really work, and I wanted something a little different, something a little more Arctic and like an outpost sort of thing, you know, like in Antarctica. If you look up pictures of those, I've seen them before. I didn't actually look up any pictures of them, so I might be way off here, but that's sort of the feel I wanted to go for, you know. Sort of like an outpost sort of building. So I went for that, and it sort of has a little bit of a lodge style with the sort of arched middle like triangle sort of roofing that goes with it. But I did use these like very, you know, bright and dark colors, very, I don't want to say not like bright exciting colors, just bland like colors that you'd see on sort of like an Arctic building or something. But here we go, we're going to do a nice little window feature, and this is sort of what brings the build together and why I changed a lot of it. After building the window on this side, I just fell in love with it, and I kind of made this the focal point of the whole build. So I just wanted to show you guys how I made that here. And it does get a little complicated with the overlapping glass because we really only have square glass pieces, some triangle glass pieces, but they don't really work necessarily that well. So this is what I got in the end. And I'm just going to put borders around these sort of pieces because you can kind of tell that they're a bunch of different pieces, and you kind of need to put the borders around them in order to make them look good in the end. So really with this build, I want to sort of make it look like a polar outpost, as I said before, and it's going to be called the Polar Outpost, of course, but it's sort of like an education center and a viewing area for the polar bears. You know, if a zoo has polar bears, I think in a realistic sense, they got a little bit of budget, they got a little bit of money to spend, so they're going to have sort of a grand polar bear exhibit because these animals need such big area and lots of needs for them, and there's an endangered species and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. So I thought it was very appropriate to sort of make this just a big polar bear exhibit building. So we ended up doing that in the end instead of making it a huge giant bear research center for all the bear species. And here we go, we're going to bring this window from the back all the way to the front, sort of make it like the focal point of the build. I think it looks great. I really love how it looks. It just looks very like up north, maybe modern Nordic, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, you know, those cool buildings you see, like, oh, the Glass Hotel in Norway or Sweden or something like these they look like this, you know, they look like these kind of buildings. This is sort of the style I wanted to go for. But back to what I was saying before about the polar bears in the building, I just wanted it to feel that way, and it's not to say that I'm not going to make an education center for the whole bear area. I still may, but I just wanted to sort of leave this as just the polar bear area because you get a nice big view out of these big windows. As I'm cutting through here, you know, I'm showing little snippets of the work because a lot of it's pretty boring and repetitive, but that's what we get in the end, is just a lot of big windows with a nice big view of the whole habitat for the people that are going to chill inside. And I think it works out really nice in the end when you see these shots, and it just seems like something that a zoo has. And there's a big jump ahead there, but that's sort of the final product of the building. For the most part, we're going to do a little bit more work on the front there, but that'll be done off camera. You'll see that when we get to the first person part. But here I am. I got to make this exhibit even bigger than it already is from this initial sort of terraforming that we did at the start of the episode. I need to make it even larger, and I kind of wanted to make the terrain a little more variant here. I wanted to add some more highs, some more lows, because it just seemed like sort of like flat cliff areas where I was just using the flattening tool to make everything sort of the same height. So there's just two different height variants where there's a low one and a high one, and I just kind of wanted to switch that up, add a few peaks so it looks like natural mountains, stuff like that. Add some areas where the polar bears can walk around that are a little different than other areas. And I just want to have some height variants for the polar bears in general. I want it to feel like it's a deep Arctic area that they're in, and you know, lots of different space for them to go hide from the guests if they don't want to be seen, and things like that I try to add in a lot of exhibits, but I think it is even more important in this exhibit due to the sheer amount of space that the polar bears need. So it's also kind of fun to make a pretty large exhibit where I can do a lot of different things in different places, play with the terrain, make some areas higher than others, and just make it look like a nice big landscape that you can look down into. Now, the only drawback of doing the polar bears, other than their need for sheer amount of space, is that they really like no vegetation at all. I mean, it makes sense. They're in the tundra, they're in the Arctic, and there's not really a lot that they have in their natural habitat, let alone anything really. So without having the option of doing a lot of foliage to sort of make the area look pretty, make it look a lot better, cover up a lot of the bad spots and, you know, the weird terrain areas, you kind of have to go through and make sure all the terrain's perfect. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm terrain painting literally everywhere, leaving basically no grass because, you know, they're not used to grass at all. Even though in some zoos they tolerate it. The zoos I've been to, there's a little grass area for them. But I kind of wanted to make this pretty realistic. Lots of dirt, lots of rock. They're going to be in very rocky places, ice places too. So I put a little bit of snow everywhere. We got coolers down, you know, it could work. But we will turn on the snow weather in the real-time walkthrough, and you guys can see how cool it looks when it's actually snowing in the game, and I think it looks awesome. So I'm excited to show you guys that, but it looks a lot better then. So don't look at it now, it's pretty bland, but we're going to do a bit of rock work here after we put down all these enrichment items. And the nice part about this is I can throw the enrichment items pretty much anywhere. They have a lot of space, so throw them in deep corners of the area, so they'll walk over there, they'll go everywhere, and it'll be really cool. But in the end, I do put a few trees around the outside of this exhibit because it did kind of lack a little bit of that enclosed, you know, zoo sort of immersive feel. So nothing inside the exhibit, of course, because in the habitat we don't want to have you know, any trees or anything, but around it we definitely add a little bit of foliage to sort of keep that Ranger Park Zoo feel. So here we're going to start doing the cave for this episode, and I wanted to have a little bit of a cave here for the people inside the building to see. They can go look at a little bit of a cave viewing and also get a view of the whole habitat. So there's a couple panels of the, as you can see there, of the window on the inside that does sort of look into this little cave area that we're going to build here. And I do cut out a bit of this because it's just, you know, placing rocks, making a cave like we do in a lot of videos. And I tried messing around by putting some snowy rocks in, sort of mixing them into the cave there, but it didn't really work out and get the look I really wanted, so I just kind of kept it as one rock. I did also try to use the tundra rocks to do that, but didn't really work out there as well. But when we turn the snow weather effect on in the real-time portion, we'll get a good look about what it should actually look like if it were in the tundra or something like this. So that's about it for the time-lapse portion. We do a lot of work off camera, but you guys will see it in just a second in the real-time walkthrough where I'm going to show the final build. We'll look at it in first person, show some landscape or some sort of overhead glam shots, and we'll also turn on the snow effect so you guys can check that out too. And I will see you guys in a second in the real-time portion. Alright everybody, we are now in the first person walkthrough of the build, and I'm really excited to show you guys a lot of what we did in this episode while talking through it. I know the time-lapse was a little sparse in this episode. That's because I had to jump around a lot and get a lot of things done because it was an extremely large build. So I hope you guys did enjoy the time-lapse, but we're going to take a little more time and do a little more with this real-time walkthrough. And excuse me if it lags, but we're starting to get a little framey in the zoo since we have so many builds now. And that's just something to warn you about before we walk through, but we've sort of cleaned up this area, and this is sort of the entrance of the polar outpost. I know you guys haven't seen a lot of this on the time-lapse. I did a lot of the cleanup of the building off the time-lapse because it was pretty boring, took a while. And I just kind of wanted to have a nice big reveal of the final building. I think it looks great. I think it really matches the theme I want to go for here, which is kind of like a polar outpost, more of a modern-ish building. But we got to use some of the pieces from the Australia pack, even though we're doing something in the Arctic sort of area. So the polar outpost sign, the amazing Berlin font by Ricey that we use throughout the zoo, and a nice little entrance area. And of course there's trash everywhere. Ever since the new update, I have seen trash everywhere regardless of the amount of bins I have everywhere. It might be because the zoo is getting extremely big, but I think it has something to do with the DLC. This is the other way. We will go down that way later, but let's head into the polar outpost and check it out. I love the entrance, the window art here, and this building has really evolved from what we sort of did in the first sort of iterations that you saw in the time-lapse. And here is the entrance here. Nothing crazy because we are getting a little framey in the zoo, so I didn't want to do too grand of an interior with a bunch of little pieces that make it look really good. It just looks decent, and I'm happy with it because I don't want to do too many interiors. I've said that in the past because it starts to lag and you don't really go in them except maybe once, like right now when we're looking through it. But I want to do a little statue here, some seating, and then the biggest thing is the big view window. Now this is the primary viewing area that I want people to view the polar bears through. You get a huge view here, and we'll step out of the glass because the glass kind of gives that veneer, but you just get a nice view of the whole habitat, and you can see what's going on. There's a polar bear right down there getting out the water, and you can also see into their cave, as there's one in there. Perfect, right when we're coming in here. We can see into their cave, so you get a little cave viewing. You can see all out there, and I think it's sort of a realistic build, even though it's pretty grand of a building. Oh, sorry, lag spike there. Pretty grand of a building. I think it works out for the realism. Polar bears, you know, if you're a zoo that has polar bears, you got to have some sort of big budget because they require a lot of space and a lot of money. So I think it is you know, warranted to have such a nice big exhibit for them. And I was planning on putting a education building here for like all the bear species, but it just kind of turned out that we got this nice polar outpost, and I think it looks great, and I'm really happy with the result here. So let's take a look down this way. This is going to be the path that leads further into the bear walk when we do different bears here. We just have about 2 more bears to do, I believe, but the polar bears took up a huge space of it. But here's a nice another nice view of the area. We're reusing that corrugated piece here from the Australia pack, and it looks really good recolored, and I think this all looks really well, nicely themed, and I think the habitat looks great. But we're gonna have to look at it in the snow when we turn the weather on because it looks so much better in the snow. It looks fantastic in the snow, so we'll look at it then. But this is sort of what you'd see in the summer, you know. We have coolers down there, a little bit of snow. I assume this would be artificial snow in the summer to keep sort of the realism going. I'm not sure how they do it necessarily. I've been to the zoo a couple times with polar bears, and you know, nothing crazy there. They usually don't have snow, but probably some fake looking stuff that looks like snow. And this way we'll continue, but let's jump out of first person now. We'll get a nice big overview of the build. It's huge, it takes up so much space, as we get a nice big lag spike right there, but that's kind of where we are at now. If you take a comparison to the grizzly bear habitat, which I thought was huge footprint, I mean, this is huge, and it's just barely good enough for their space requirements. So they require a lot of space, a ton of space. but I think it looks great, and we're lagging a little bit again. I apologize for that, but we're just at that phase in the project where everything's going to start lagging a bit. But here is a nice big overview of the habitat, and I wanted to do very natural looking, and I know natural for the polar bears is pretty bland, but let me turn the snow on really quick and we'll check it out. Now as the snow starts to fall here, you get a sense of what the habitat should really look like if it were realistic. I'm not sure if most zoos would be open in the winter to see the polar bears in their natural habitat, but oh, sorry for the lag spike again. But I think it looks great with the snow on, and I don't turn the weather on a lot for my zoo, but I think this is one of those instances where we really should turn it on, because it just looks fantastic with the snow on, and it really matches the style for the polar bears. And their habitat looks pretty bland without the snow on, so turning the snow on just makes it look so much better. Let's take a look at it from inside the building here, and it looks really nice and cozy in the building. You can see them hanging around out there. Lots of white snow out there, but the rocks look fantastic with the snow on. I love the rock textures when they turn the snow on, and polar bear playing with the ball down there. And I'm really happy with this build. It took a long time to build. This was probably the biggest build in the park, and I know I say that sometimes quite a bit, but this one definitely is. But I just wanted to say again, overall, I think this looks great. In the snow, it looks even better. The polar bears love it. They swim around, and they got all the space that they need here. And I think it was a really fun build to do, something big. And I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do to continue the series this week. But I ended up just getting some ideas for a nice big polar bear habitat over in this area, and it worked out great. But it took a while, lots of iterations, lots of stuff I didn't record, lots of stuff that was recorded but really boring to watch, lots of stuff that I jump around a lot during the recording, and I know it's a big shock from the time-lapse to here, but that's why I wanted to do sort of a bigger real-time walkthrough here that maybe sort of compensates for not such good time-lapse this week. There is quite a bit, but it's not as good as usual. You don't see everything built, but that's because with such a big build, I don't want the video to be 30 minutes long, because that's just too long for a Planet Zoo video, unless you know you're doing a whole park walkthrough, which could be warranted in that case. But I hope you guys did enjoy this build. I had a lot of fun making it. In the future episodes, I feel like I want to jump over here, maybe do the chimpanzees or the great apes or something. Let me turn the snow off really quick. Alright, the snow is now off, and as I was saying before, I want to move over in this area and continue. I know I want to do a big elephant habitat. I've never done elephants in this game. I've always wanted to. Same with the polar bears. Never done them, but I always wanted to, so we did that. And I've never done any great apes, gorillas, chimps, stuff like that. You know, the bonobos, the mandrills look crazy cool. And the capuchin monkeys, maybe even the macaques. All those monkeys I kind of want to do in a big ape house, which could be next episode. Maybe a little hint here. I don't know. We'll see how big it actually turns out to be. I mean, this episode was pretty big, so maybe we'll do maybe a smaller build next episode so we don't make the zoo too laggy. But elephants over here, I'm thinking. But next episode, I think we'll step out of the bear area. We've done a lot of bears lately. Still need to finish that food area up. But just sort of a overview here. The zoo is looking great, but man, we're getting huge. The boundaries are where the sand is, and we're getting pretty close to it on either side here. So we should go farther back, but I mean, even then, there's so many animals I still want to do, and not a ton of space. And man, is it getting pretty framey and laggy as well. But you know, it's all great. It looks great. Love this project. We're gonna keep trucking on with it. Even if it gets down to like 10 frames, we'll still do it. We'll be able to do some cinematics where we speed it up a little. It'll work. So thanks for bearing with me. I hope you guys did enjoy the build. I had a lot of fun making it. I think a lot of nice screenshots will come out of this, even though there's so much trash everywhere now ever since that update with the Australia attack. But if you guys did enjoy this, let me know down below in the comments. Please like, comment, and subscribe as always, and I will see you in the next episode of Ranger Park Zoo.